In the heart of Seattle, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and busy streets buzzed with life, lived a 14-year-old boy named Ethan. He wasn't your typical teenager glued to video games or social media. Instead, Ethan spent most of his time tinkering with gadgets in his garage, trying to fix broken electronics he found around the house. This hobby wasn't just something fun for him. It was a way to feel closer to his late father, who had been an aircraft mechanic before passing away when Ethan was only 6. Every weekend, Ethan would grab his skateboard and head to the nearby airstrip. Watching planes take off and land gave him a sense of peace. It reminded him of the stories his dad used to tell about engines roaring to life and wings slicing through the sky. On one sunny afternoon, as Ethan leaned against the fence at the airstrip, something unusual caught his eye. A sleek private jet sat on the tarmac, gleaming under the bright sun. A small crowd had gathered nearby, whispering excitedly about how this plane belonged to Arthur Langston, a billionaire tech mogul whose name was all over the news lately. Everyone knew Arthur. His company was behind some of the coolest inventions people couldn't stop talking about. But what drew Ethan's attention wasn't the jet itself. It was the strange figure lurking near its engine. The man wore a baseball cap pulled low over his face and moved quickly, almost nervously. Ethan squinted, trying to get a better look. That's when he saw it. The guy was fiddling with the engine compartment, doing something that didn't seem right. Alarm bells rang in Ethan's head. His dad had taught him enough about planes to know that messing with an engine could spell disaster. Without thinking twice, Ethan shouted, "Hey, what are you doing?" The man froze, startled, then glanced around before bolting away like a deer caught in headlights. Ethan wanted to chase after him but hesitated. Something told him to check the plane first. His hands trembled slightly as he climbed over the fence. He knew he shouldn't be trespassing, but he couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in his gut. When he reached the engine, Ethan knelt down and peered inside. Even though he wasn't an expert, he recognized the signs of tampering immediately. Wires were cut cleanly, not frayed like they'd be if they'd worn out naturally. Someone had deliberately damaged the system. Panic surged through him. If this plane took off, there was no telling what might happen. Ethan scanned the area and spotted Arthur Langston himself walking toward the jet. The billionaire looked relaxed, chatting casually with someone on his phone. Time seemed to slow down as Ethan realized he needed to act fast. He sprinted across the tarmac, dodging luggage carts and ground staff, shouting at the top of his lungs, "Mr. Langston, stop. Your plane was sabotaged. Don't fly." People turned to stare, surprised by the sudden commotion. Security guards rushed forward, assuming Ethan was just another overzealous fan trying to get close to the famous billionaire. But Ethan didn't care. All he could think about was stopping the plane from taking off. As he got closer, Arthur paused mid-step, his expression shifting from annoyance to curiosity. "What did you say?" he asked sharply, lowering his phone. Gasping for breath, Ethan blurted out everything: the suspicious man, the damaged wiring, and his fear that flying the plane would lead to catastrophe. For a moment, Arthur stared at him, weighing whether to believe the wild claims of a teenager. Then, with a firm nod, he ordered his team to inspect the aircraft immediately. Minutes later, the verdict came back. Ethan was right. The engine had been sabotaged, and flying the plane would have ended in tragedy. Relief washed over everyone present, especially Arthur, who approached Ethan with gratitude written all over his face. "You saved my life," he said simply, shaking Ethan's hand. "I don't know how to thank you." As the news spread, Ethan became an overnight sensation. People hailed him as a hero, marveling at how a young boy had prevented a potential disaster. But for Ethan, the real adventure was only beginning. Little did he know, his simple act of bravery would open doors he never imagined possible and bring unexpected challenges along the way. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside his window. He stretched lazily, still half asleep, when his mom called out from the kitchen. "Ethan, come here for a second." Her voice was unusually excited, and he could hear the faint buzz of conversation coming from downstairs. Curious, Ethan threw on a hoodie and shuffled down the stairs. As he entered the living room, his jaw dropped. Sitting on their worn-out couch sipping coffee with his mom was none other than Arthur Langston himself. The billionaire tech mogul looked completely different in person compared to the polished photos Ethan had seen online. Here he seemed more approachable, almost like any regular guy, except for the expensive watch glinting on his wrist and the sleek black car parked outside their modest home. "Good morning," Arthur said warmly, standing up to greet Ethan. "I hope I'm not intruding." Ethan blinked, unsure how to respond. No, it's fine," he mumbled, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. His mom shot him a look that clearly meant be polite, so he added, "Thanks for stopping by." Arthur chuckled softly. "Actually, I should be thanking you. Again." He gestured toward the chair next to him. "Have a seat. We need to talk." Ethan hesitated but eventually sat down, his mind racing. What did Arthur want? Was this some kind of formal thank you visit, or was there something else? "I've been thinking a lot about what happened yesterday," Arthur began, leaning forward slightly. "You didn't just save my life. You showed incredible courage and quick thinking. Not many people would have done what you did." Ethan shrugged, feeling uncomfortable under the spotlight. "I just saw something weird and thought I should say something. Anyone would have done the same." Arthur shook his head firmly. "No, they wouldn't. Trust me, I've seen enough to know that most people freeze in situations like that. But you didn't. And that says a lot about who you are." For a moment, silence filled the room. Ethan glanced at his mom, who was smiling, proudly, and then back at Arthur. The billionaire's expression softened as he continued. "Look, Ethan, I owe you more than words can express. So I want to repay you, not just with money or gifts, but with opportunities. Tell me, what do you love doing? What makes you tick?" Ethan blinked, caught off guard by the question. No one had ever asked him that before, at least not like this. Slowly, he started talking about his passion for engineering and aviation. He told Arthur about the hours he spent fixing old gadgets in his garage, how he dreamed of building machines that could change the world. Someday, the more he talked, the more animated he became, forgetting for a moment that he was speaking to one of the richest men in the country. When Ethan finally paused, Arthur grinned. "Perfect," he said. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. Handing it to Ethan, he explained, "This is an invitation to join our summer program at Langston Tech headquarters. It's designed for young innovators like you, kids with big ideas, and even bigger potential. You'll get to work alongside some of the brightest minds in technology, learn about robotics, aerospace design, and much more." Ethan stared at the envelope, his heart pounding. This sounded too good to be true. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Dead serious," Arthur replied. "You earned this, Ethan. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Ethan's mom placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes glistening with pride. "Go for it, sweetheart," she encouraged gently. "This is your chance." Overwhelmed, Ethan nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, clutching the envelope tightly. "I'll do it." The weeks leading up to the summer program flew by in a blur. Ethan spent hours researching Langston Tech, reading about its groundbreaking projects and revolutionary inventions. He couldn't believe he'd soon be stepping foot inside those hallowed halls. At the same time, though, doubts crept into his mind. Would he fit in? Everyone else probably came from fancy schools and had access to resources he could only dream of. What if he messed up? But when the day finally arrived, all those worries melted away. From the moment he walked through the glass doors of Langston Tech HQ, Ethan felt like he belonged. The atmosphere was electric, buzzing with energy and creativity. Everywhere he looked, people were brainstorming ideas, testing prototypes, and solving problems. It was like stepping into a whole new world. One where imagination had no limits. During orientation, Ethan met other participants in the program. They came from all walks of life, each bringing their own unique perspective and talents. Some were coding prodigies, while others excelled in physics or biology. Despite their differences, They shared a common goal: to make the world a better place through innovation. One of the first things Ethan noticed was how hands-on the program was. Instead of sitting in lectures all day, they worked in teams on real-world challenges. One project involved designing a drone capable of delivering medical supplies to remote areas. Another focused on creating eco-friendly alternatives to single-use plastics. Every task pushed Ethan out of his comfort zone, forcing him to think critically and collaborate with others. Throughout the summer, Ethan soaked up every bit of knowledge he could. He learned how to code, built his first robot, and even helped develop a prototype for a solar-powered device. Each success, no matter how small, fueled his confidence. For the first time in his life, he felt like he truly belonged somewhere. Yet, despite the excitement, shadows lingered in the back of his mind. Who had sabotaged Arthur's plane? And why? The mystery gnawed at him, refusing to let go. During quiet moments, Ethan found himself replaying the events in his head, piecing together fragments of memories. Something about the man in the baseball cap haunted him. Why had he targeted Arthur? What drove someone to such extremes? Determined to find answers, Ethan decided to dig deeper. With Arthur's permission, he gained access to security footage from the airstrip. Late at night, after everyone else had gone home, he pored over the grainy images, searching for clues. It wasn't easy. His eyes grew tired, and frustration often got the better of him, but he refused to give up. Eventually, he spotted something odd. A figure matching the description of the saboteur appeared briefly in the background of another video, taken weeks earlier. Ethan zoomed in, studying the face carefully. Though blurry, it was enough to confirm his suspicions. The saboteur hadn't acted alone. Someone else was involved. Excited yet cautious, Ethan shared his findings with Arthur. The billionaire listened intently, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "You're right," he said finally. "This isn't over. Whoever did this won't stop until they achieve their goal." Fear prickled at the edges of Ethan's mind, but he pushed it aside. He'd come too far to back down now. If anything, uncovering the truth only strengthened his resolve. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't face it alone. As the summer program at Langston Tech drew to a close, Ethan found himself torn between excitement and unease. On one hand, he had accomplished more in those few months than he ever thought possible. He'd built robots, designed prototypes, and even contributed to a project that could revolutionize renewable energy. But on the other hand, the shadow of the sabotage attempt still loomed large over him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of that baseball cap, the suspicious figure near the plane, and the cold realization that someone wanted Arthur Langston dead. Ethan tried to push those thoughts aside during the day, focusing instead on soaking up every ounce of knowledge the program offered. He spent hours in workshops, learning how to code advanced algorithms, solder circuits, and even pilot drones. The instructors were patient and encouraging, treating him like an equal despite his age. For the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he wasn't just dreaming, he was doing. His confidence grew with each passing week, and so did his bond with the other participants. They weren't just teammates. They became friends who shared late-night brainstorming sessions and laughed about their mistakes over pizza. But no matter how much fun he had or how proud he felt of his progress, Ethan couldn't shake the nagging feeling that danger was lurking around the corner. It gnawed at him during quiet moments, reminding him that the saboteur was still out there somewhere. What if they tried again? What if next time, Ethan wouldn't be there to stop them? One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ethan decided to take a walk outside the tech campus. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass. He wandered aimlessly, letting his thoughts drift. That's when he bumped into Arthur, who was sitting on a bench overlooking a small pond. The billionaire looked relaxed, scrolling through emails on his phone, but there was a weariness in his eyes that Ethan hadn't noticed before. "Hey," Ethan said softly, not wanting to startle him. Arthur glanced up, surprised. "Oh, hey, Ethan." What brings you out here? Ethan hesitated for a moment, then sat down beside him. Just thinking. Arthur raised an eyebrow. About what? Ethan sighed. About everything. The program, the plane, whoever tried to hurt you. I can't stop wondering why they did it. And honestly, I'm scared they might try again. Arthur nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. You're not alone in that. Fear, he admitted. I've beefed up security everywhere, my house, my office, even my car, but you're right. Until we find out who's behind this, none of us are truly safe. For a while, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the rustling leaves and the distant hum of traffic. Finally, Arthur broke the silence. Listen, Ethan, I need to tell you something. You've done so much for me already, but I have a favor to ask. Ethan turned to look at him, curiosity sparking in his chest. What is it? Arthur leaned back, staring at the water as if searching for the right words. After the sabotage attempt, I hired a private investigator to dig deeper into what happened. They uncovered some troubling information. It seems the person responsible isn't working alone. There's a bigger conspiracy here, one that involves people within my own company. Ethan's stomach tightened. Are you saying someone inside Langston Tech betrayed you? Arthur nodded grimly. It appears so. Someone high up in the organization leaked confidential data to competitors. When I started closing loopholes and tightening security measures, they panicked and decided to eliminate me altogether. The weight of Arthur's words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. Betrayal from within. It was worse than he'd imagined. Do you know who it is? He asked quietly. Not yet, Arthur replied. But we're getting closer. And that's where you come in. Ethan blinked, unsure he'd heard correctly. Me? How can I help? Arthur smiled faintly. You've proven yourself to be incredibly resourceful. Your instincts are sharp and your ability to think on your feet saved my life. I want you to keep helping us uncover the truth. Not directly, of course. You're still a kid and I won't put you in harm's way. But I trust your judgment. If anything seems off to you, let me know immediately. Ethan swallowed hard. The idea of being part of such a high-stakes investigation both thrilled and terrified him. Okay, he said finally. I'll do whatever I can. Over the next few weeks, Ethan threw himself into the task with renewed determination. Between classes and projects at Langston Tech, he scoured old security footage, reviewed employee records, and analyzed patterns in communication logs. It was exhausting work, but it also gave him a sense of purpose. He was no longer just a teenager, tinkering in his garage. He was making a real difference. One afternoon, while reviewing surveillance tapes from the day of the sabotage, Ethan noticed something peculiar. A janitorial worker had entered a restricted area shortly before the incident occurred. At first glance, it seemed routine, just another employee going about their job. But something about the timing didn't sit right with Ethan. He rewound the footage and played it again, pausing frame by frame. Then he saw it, a flicker of movement near the engine compartment, barely visible in the corner of the screen. His heart raced as he zoomed in on the image. Though the quality was grainy, he could make out the outline of a tool, a wrench perhaps, being used to tamper with the wires. This wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough to raise suspicions. Excited, Ethan rushed to Arthur's office to share his discovery. When he arrived, Arthur was on a call, pacing back and forth with a furrowed brow. Ethan waited patiently until the call ended, then explained what he'd found. Arthur listened, intently, his expression growing darker with each detail. This confirms it, Arthur said grimly. We're dealing with someone clever and dangerous. Whoever orchestrated this knew exactly how to cover their tracks. What do we do now? Ethan asked, his voice tinged with anxiety. We stay vigilant, Arthur replied, and we prepare for whatever comes next. The weeks following Ethan's discovery of the suspicious janitorial worker were tense. Arthur Langston had increased security measures across all his facilities, but the looming threat still hung over everyone like a dark cloud. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were playing catch-up, always one step behind whoever was orchestrating the sabotage. Every time he walked into Langston Tech headquarters, he scanned the room instinctively, looking for anything or anyone out of place. Despite the unease, life went on. The summer program was winding down, and Ethan found himself spending more time working directly with Arthur's team. They'd formed a small task force to investigate the conspiracy, though Ethan knew he wasn't officially part of it. Still, Arthur trusted him enough to share updates and ask for his input. It felt surreal. Ethan, a 14-year-old kid from Seattle, sitting in meetings with some of the brightest minds in tech, discussing corporate espionage and sabotage. One evening, after a long day of reviewing data and brainstorming strategies, Ethan decided to take a break. He wandered into the cafeteria, where a few other participants from the summer program were chatting animatedly over snacks. For a moment, he envied their carefree energy. While they joked about inside jokes and shared stories about their weekends, Ethan's mind kept drifting back to the mystery at hand. Was he supposed to feel guilty for being so consumed by something most kids his age wouldn't even think about? Or was this just who he was now? As he grabbed a soda from the vending machine, one of the instructors approached him. Mr. Carter, a tall, wiry man with glasses perpetually perched on the edge of his nose, had been mentoring Ethan throughout the program. "Hey, champ," he said, leaning against the wall casually. "You look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders." Ethan forced a smile. "Just thinking." "About the investigation?" Mr. Carter guessed. Lowering his voice, Ethan nodded. "Yeah, I can't stop wondering if we're missing something obvious. Like, what if there's another attack coming and we don't see it until it's too late?" Mr. Carter studied him for a moment before responding. "You know, curiosity is a good thing. It drives innovation, discovery, all that stuff, but sometimes you have to let the professionals handle the heavy lifting. You've already done more than anyone could expect. Don't burn yourself out chasing answers." "I'm not doing this because I have to," Ethan replied quietly. "I'm doing it because I want to help, because someone has to." Mr. Carter smiled faintly. "Fair enough. Just remember, you're allowed to be a kid too. Even heroes need downtime." A few days later, the calm shattered. It started with a fire alarm blaring through the building during a high-profile event, celebrating Langston Tech's latest breakthrough. A revolutionary AI system designed to streamline global supply chains. Dozens of reporters, investors, and industry leaders filled the auditorium, eager to hear Arthur's keynote speech. Ethan was backstage helping set up equipment for the presentation when the alarm went off. At first, everyone assumed it was a false alarm. Fire drills happened occasionally, especially in buildings as secure as Langston Tech HQ, but then came the shouts. People began pouring out of the auditorium, panic spreading like wildfire. Ethan dropped what he was holding and sprinted toward the chaos, his heart pounding. What if this wasn't an accident? What if it was another attempt to harm Arthur? He spotted Arthur near the stage, surrounded by security guards ushering him toward the exit. "Wait," Ethan called, pushing through the crowd. Arthur turned, recognizing his voice immediately. "What's going on?" Arthur asked sharply, his face pale but composed. "I don't think this is a drill," Ethan said quickly. "We need to check the power grid. Something feels off." Arthur hesitated for only a second before nodding. "Let's go." Together, they moved against the flow of evacuating guests, heading deeper into the building. As they reached the maintenance corridor leading to the main power grid, Ethan slowed down, his instincts screaming at him to proceed carefully. That's when he saw it. A worker in a uniform crouched near a large metal box labeled Electrical Hub. The person froze, clearly startled by their presence. Without thinking, Ethan stepped forward. "What are you doing?" he demanded, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. The worker stood up slowly, revealing a device, strapped to the side of the electrical panel. Ethan's blood ran cold. It looked like a bomb, or at least something designed to cause significant damage. Before the worker could react, Ethan lunged forward, grabbing the device and yanking it free. Sparks flew as wires disconnected, and the worker bolted, disappearing into the chaos outside. Arthur rushed to Ethan's side, his eyes wide with shock. "Are you okay?" he asked, gripping Ethan's shoulder tightly. I'm fine, Ethan replied breathlessly, clutching the device. But this isn't over. Whoever sent them will try again. Arthur didn't argue. Instead, he pulled out his phone and dialed security. Within minutes, the area was swarming with guards and emergency responders. The evacuation continued smoothly, with no injuries reported. Thanks to Ethan's quick thinking, disaster had been averted, for now. Later that night, as Ethan sat in Arthur's office recounting the events, exhaustion finally caught up with him. His hands trembled slightly as he sipped the hot chocolate Arthur had ordered for him. "You saved us again," Arthur said softly. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," Ethan replied, managing a weak smile. I couldn't stand by and do nothing." Arthur leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You remind me of myself when I was younger, determined, fearless, willing to take risks for the greater good. But let me tell you something, Ethan. You're smarter than I ever was at your age. And that's saying something." Ethan laughed nervously, unsure how to respond. Deep down, though, he felt a flicker of pride. For all the fear and uncertainty swirling around him, he'd proven once again that he could rise to the occasion. Still, the danger hadn't passed. If anything, today's incident confirmed that the saboteur, or saboteurs, were growing bolder. Ethan glanced at Arthur, who was staring out the window, lost in thought. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The aftermath of the attempted sabotage at Langston Tech headquarters left everyone shaken. The news spread quickly, not just within the company, but across the entire city. Reporters camped outside the building, eager to get a statement from Arthur Langston about what had happened. Social media buzzed with theories and speculation. Some people praised Ethan as a hero, while others dismissed him as lucky or overhyped. But amidst all the noise, Ethan stayed quiet. He didn't care about fame or recognition. He only cared about making sure no one else got hurt. Arthur, on the other hand, was furious. Not at Ethan, of course, but at himself. "I should have seen this coming," he muttered during one of their late-night meetings in his office. "They're getting bolder, more reckless, and I keep letting them slip through my fingers." Ethan sat across from him, fiddling with the edge of his hoodie. "It's not your fault," he said softly. "Whoever's behind this is smart. They planned everything carefully. We're doing everything we can to stop them." Arthur sighed, heavily rubbing his temples. "You're right, but it doesn't make me feel any better. Every time something like this happens, I worry it'll put innocent people in danger, including you." Ethan looked up sharply. "Don't say that. I made the choice to help. No one forced me." "I know," Arthur replied, his voice tinged with guilt. "But still, you're 14 years old. You shouldn't have to carry this kind of weight on your shoulders." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "What's our next move?" Arthur straightened in his chair, his expression hardening. "We find out who's behind this once and for all." Over the next few days, the investigation intensified. Arthur brought in a team of private investigators, cybersecurity experts, and even former law enforcement officers to dig deeper into the conspiracy. Ethan continued to assist wherever he could, analyzing data, reviewing security footage, and keeping an eye out for anything suspicious. It was exhausting work, but he refused to slow down. Each new clue brought them closer to uncovering the truth and stopping whoever was trying to destroy Arthur's life. One evening, after hours of poring over documents in Arthur's office, Ethan stumbled upon something strange. Buried deep in a folder of employee records was a series of emails between two individuals discussing Phase 2. At first glance, they seemed harmless enough, just vague references to deadlines and logistics. But one phrase caught Ethan's attention. "Cut the cord when the spotlight shines brightest." His heart skipped a beat. The words echoed the sabotage attempts he'd witnessed firsthand. The cut wires on the plane, the tampered electrical grid. Could this be the smoking gun they'd been looking for? Excited yet cautious, Ethan flagged the emails and showed them to Arthur immediately. Arthur studied the messages carefully, his jaw tightening with each line. "This is it," he said finally, his voice low but firm. "This is how they communicate. Whoever sent these knows exactly what they're doing." "But who are they?" Ethan asked, frustration creeping into his tone. "How do we find them?" "We follow the trail," Arthur replied, "and we stay one step ahead." The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A few nights later, Ethan received a call from Arthur in the middle of the night. "Get dressed," Arthur said urgently. "We need you at HQ, now." Confused but alert, Ethan threw on some clothes and hurried to the car waiting outside his house. When he arrived at Langston Tech, the parking lot was eerily empty, save for a few black SUVs parked near the entrance. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Security guards stood posted at every corner and the lights in the main lobby were dimmed. Arthur greeted him with a grim expression. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, his pulse racing. "We found him," Arthur said simply. "The person coordinating the attacks, he's here in the building." Ethan's breath hitched. "Here? How?" "One of my investigators traced the source of those emails back to an IP address linked to someone inside the company. Turns out he's been hiding in plain sight this whole time." Before Ethan could respond, Arthur motioned for him to follow. Together they made their way to the surveillance room, where a team of security personnel monitored live feeds from cameras throughout the facility. On one of the screens, a man wearing a maintenance uniform moved cautiously through a restricted hallway, clutching a small device in his hand. "That's him," Arthur whispered, pointing to the screen. "He's heading toward the server room." Ethan's stomach churned. If the man reached the servers, he could cripple the entire operation, or worse, cause catastrophic damage. Without hesitation, Ethan turned to Arthur. "Let me go after him." "No," Arthur snapped, his voice sharp. "It's too dangerous. My security team will handle it." "But I know the layout of the building better than anyone," Ethan argued. "And if something goes wrong, I can think fast. Please, trust me." Arthur hesitated, torn between protecting Ethan and acknowledging the logic of his argument. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but you stick close to me, understand?" Ethan nodded, adrenaline coursing through him as they hurried toward the server room. The corridors were eerily quiet, the only sound the soft echo of their footsteps against the tiled floor. As they approached the door, Ethan spotted the man slipping inside, unaware he'd been followed. Arthur signaled for Ethan to wait while he radioed the security team. But before backup could arrive, the man reappeared, holding the device aloft. His face twisted into a smug grin as he pressed a button, triggering a loud beeping noise. "Too late," he sneered. "You lose." Without thinking, Ethan lunged forward, tackling the man to the ground. The device clattered out of his grasp, rolling harmlessly across the floor. Arthur rushed in, pinning the man down until security arrived moments later. As the guards hauled the saboteur away, Arthur turned to Ethan, his expression a mix of relief and awe. "You did it," he said, pulling Ethan into a tight hug. "You stopped him." Ethan exhaled shakily, his legs trembling beneath him. For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'd finally turned the tide. Later that night, as Ethan lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he replayed the events in his mind. The fear, the chaos, the split-second decisions, it all felt surreal. Yet, despite everything, he couldn't deny the sense of accomplishment swelling in his chest. He'd faced danger head-on and come out stronger on the other side. In the weeks following the arrest of the saboteur, life began to settle back into a semblance of normalcy. The media circus surrounding Langston Tech slowly died down, and people returned to their routines, working, innovating, dreaming. But, for Ethan, things were far from ordinary. He had become something of a legend, not just within the company, but across the entire city. People whispered about the teenager who had saved a billionaire's life, not once but twice, and thwarted a conspiracy that could have brought down one of the most influential tech companies in the world. Ethan tried to ignore the attention. He didn't want praise or recognition. He just wanted to focus on what mattered most: learning, creating, and making a difference. But it wasn't easy. Strangers stopped him on the street to thank him. Teachers at school called him a role model. Even his mom, who usually kept her emotions in check, couldn't stop beaming with pride every time someone mentioned her son's name. Despite the whirlwind of admiration, Ethan remained grounded. He knew none of it would have been possible without Arthur's trust and guidance. And as grateful as he was for everything Arthur had done for him, Ethan also understood that this chapter of his life was just the beginning. There was still so much more he wanted to achieve, and so many ways he could use his newfound platform to help others. One evening, Arthur invited Ethan to a private dinner at his penthouse apartment overlooking the Seattle skyline. The view was breathtaking, with twinkling lights stretching as far as the eye could see. But Ethan barely noticed. His mind was racing with questions. Why had Arthur asked him here? Was there another crisis brewing, or was this simply a gesture of gratitude? As they sat down to eat, Arthur raised a glass of sparkling water. "To courage," he said, smiling warmly. "And to second chances." Ethan mirrored the toast awkwardly, unsure how to respond. "Thanks," he mumbled. "But I didn't do anything special." Arthur chuckled softly. "That's where you're wrong. You did something extraordinary, not because you stopped an attack or uncovered a conspiracy, but because you refused to let fear hold you back. That takes real strength." Ethan shifted, uncomfortably in his seat. Compliments weren't his thing. "I just saw something I thought was wrong and tried to fix it. Anyone would have done the same." "No, they wouldn't," Arthur countered firmly. "Most people turn a blind eye when trouble comes knocking. But you stepped up. And that's why I want to make sure you never lose that spark." Ethan frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Arthur leaned forward, his expression serious yet kind. "I've been thinking a lot about the future. For you, for me, for everyone whose lives we can touch. You've got an incredible gift, Ethan. A sharp mind, a big heart, and a willingness to take risks. Those are rare qualities in anyone, let alone someone your age. So I want to help you nurture that potential." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "I'm starting a foundation, a program specifically designed to support young innovators like you. Kids with big ideas who need resources, mentorship, and encouragement to bring those ideas to life. And I want you to be its first ambassador." Ethan stared at him, stunned. "Ambassador? Me?" "Yes, you," Arthur replied with a grin. "Who, better to inspire others than someone who's already proven what's possible? You'll travel to schools, speak at events, and work directly with students to show them that no dream is too big and no obstacle is too great, if they believe in themselves." For a moment, Ethan was speechless. The idea of standing in front of crowds, sharing his story, and encouraging others felt both thrilling and terrifying. Could he really live up to that responsibility? What if he failed? As if sensing his doubts, Arthur placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to decide right now. Take your time. Think about it, but know this, I wouldn't ask if I didn't think you were ready." Ethan nodded slowly, his mind swirling with possibilities. Maybe this was his chance to pay it forward, to give other kids the same opportunities Arthur had given him, to remind them that heroes aren't born, they're made. Months passed, and Ethan threw himself into his new role with the same determination he'd shown during the investigation. He visited schools, gave speeches, and mentored students eager to learn about engineering, robotics, and problem-solving. Each interaction filled him with a sense of purpose he'd never experienced before. Watching young faces light up with excitement as they tinkered with gadgets or brainstormed solutions reminded Ethan of his own journey and how far he'd come since those quiet afternoons at the airstrip. But perhaps the most rewarding part of his work was launching a scholarship fund through Arthur's foundation. Together, they created opportunities for underprivileged students to pursue careers in STEM fields. For Ethan, it was deeply personal. Growing up, he'd often felt limited by his circumstances, his modest home, his lack of access to advanced tools or classes. Now he was helping break down those barriers for others. Word of Ethan's efforts spread quickly. News outlets hailed him as a symbol of hope and resilience, while social media flooded with messages from fans inspired by his story. Yet, despite the accolades, Ethan stayed humble. He knew success wasn't measured by headlines or awards. It was measured by impact, by the number of lives touched, dreams ignited, and futures changed. Years later, as Ethan stood on stage accepting an award for his contributions to science and education, he reflected on how far he'd come. From a shy boy watching planes soar, above the tarmac to a leader empowering the next generation of innovators, his journey had been anything but ordinary. But through it all, one lesson remained clear. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to act despite it. As the crowd erupted into applause, Ethan smiled, remembering the day that started it all. The day he shouted those unforgettable words, "Your plane was sabotaged. Don't fly." It was a simple act, born out of instinct and compassion, but it changed everything, for Ethan, for Arthur, and for countless others whose lives intersected with theirs along the way. And as Ethan looked out at the sea of faces cheering him on, he realized something profound. Heroes aren't just the ones who save lives. They're the ones who inspire others to believe in themselves and in the power of possibility.